Okay, let's unpack this. The sources you've shared give us a chilling, really provocative framework.
Hmm.
They argue that what we're all witnessing globally is, well, it's far more than just democratic backsliding.
Far more.
This is a complete systemic collapse of the entire post 1945 liberal order. The sources are calling it the end of liberal gravity.
And that's not just a dramatic title. That concept, which is drawn heavily from Farid Novin's essay, is really the whole foundation of this deep dive.
Right.
Our mission here is to synthesize for you exactly why that post-war system has, well, unraveled, and specifically to detail the structural reasons why advanced democracies like the UK and the EU are now facing these interconnected, almost existential crises.
And we're looking at a whole range of material, right?
Right.
Expert commentary, polling data, analysis from the Global Review.
All of it, all pointing to this consolidation of a new governing paradigm in the U.S. and, the devastating consequences of how exportable it is.
And that distinction between the Trump we saw the first time and the version that returned in 2025 it's absolutely crucial here, isn't it?
It's everything.
Yeah.
I think the constitutional scholar Kinlane Chappell noted this back in, February of 2025?
Yeah, that's right.
She said, Trump 1.0 sort of flailed around. He was often hampered by internal resistance, a real lack of a clear plan.
That was the old guard kind of pushing back from the inside.
Precisely. But Trump 2.0 returned with a detailed blueprint.
Yeah.
I mean, with lawyers, a massive network of loyalists, and a comprehensive plan to fundamentally alter how government operates.
So this wasn't an anomaly anymore. This was a structured, post-liberal paradigm taking root.
Right at the heart of the global hegemon, yes.
Okay, so let's define that seismic shift. The sources identify, 3 pillars of that old system that this new paradigm just completely rejects.
3 mutually reinforcing pillars, yeah.
Mm.
First, the whole idea of liberal democratic legitimacy itself.
The notion that a country like the U.S. governs itself by a stable set of rules.
Exactly. Second, institution-mediated constraint on raw power.
So things like the UN, the WTO, even NATO.
All of that. And third, and this one is really foundational, is the premise of U.S. strategic self-restraint. The idea that the U.S. would temper its own power for the sake of leading a stable global alliance.
And Trumpism just rejects all three.
Explicitly. For purely transactional, self-interested reasons.
So that leads us to the core political concept that defines this new model, you called it.
Plebiscitary autocracy.
That's a heavy phrase. So it's not a classic dictatorship. It's more executive-centered autocracy that's embedded inside the formal democratic institutions.
That's the key. And the plebiscitary part is the source of its legitimacy.
The idea that the leader is speaking directly for the people.
Right. Bypassing all the institutions, Congress, the courts, the civil service, and framing them as illegitimate or, globalist, it prioritizes loyalty over legality.
It gives the executive a kind of aggressive mandate to just smash those institutional constraints.
And the evidence for this was immediate. This wasn't a slow burn in 2025. It was a hammer blow.
It was aggressive, it was rapid, and it was targeted.
Within the first 100 days, the administration was systematically removing anyone who might provide some kind of constraint. We saw the immediate firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And top military lawyers, too.
Yes, in February 2025, this wasn't just about personnel. It was about ensuring the military leadership would not question executive orders, period.
And then on the civilian side, you had this flurry of activity, over 130 executive orders.
All aimed at overriding laws, shattering guardrails, and this whole thing was backed by a ready-made blueprint, Project 2025.
Which is designed to dismantle the neutral federal civil service.
By replacing professional, nonpartisan workers with loyalists. It's about taking partisan control of the DOJ, the FBI, the FTC.
So the FBI building is still there, the Justice Department is still signing documents.
But on the inside, their function has been completely inverted.
They're not enforcing federal law impartially anymore. They're just instruments of political will.
Exactly. And that systematic approach is what makes this so disruptive to the entire global order.
Okay, so if the U.S. provides the tactical model, let's talk about the deeper forces. The sources argue we need to stop talking about democratic backsliding and start looking at it through the lens of geoeconomics.
Geoeconomics is the key shift. It's the bundling of politics, economics, trade, military power, cultural policy, all into a single transactional competition.
So the old separation between, say, free markets and geopolitics is just gone.
It's gone. Everything is a weapon, and every relationship is a transaction. It's a return to classic pre-1945 power politics.
And veteran observers saw this coming. Yanis Varoufakis, in his December 2025 interviews, he talked about feeling a cold grip tightening.
He did. He said he saw the decimation of international law, a clear parallel to the interwar period.
What's fascinating is how that hard economic analysis connects to these cultural shifts. The journalist Gillian Tett highlighted something jarring: the role of the rabid misogynist manosphere.
It's jarring to hear, but she argues it's fundamental.
I mean, it sounds like internet culture warfare, not global politics.
But Tett's point is that the focus on competition and aggression rather than empathy, this emphasis on strength and purity, it mirrors 1930s fascism. It becomes the cultural justification for the political system.
Only the strong leader who rejects wokeness can protect the nation.
And that feeds directly back into the America First theory of global order.
The summary is just brutal. Alliances are protection rackets. Institutions are disposable instruments.
Law is subordinate to executive interpretation. And democracy is validated by the size of the rally crowd, not by institutional process.
And the sources are clear. This isn't some grand conspiracy. It's a functional alignment.
Yes, it finds common ground with Putin's sovereign democracy or Xi's civilizational statism because they all agree on the core premise. National sovereignty trumps international law.
So if the U.S. is the accelerant, the sources identify the U.K. as, well, as exceptionally vulnerable to this contagion.
They call it a high-trust democracy with dangerously low formal constraint.
Yeah.
It's a constitutional trap.
A trap. How so?
Well, if you compare the UK to the US or most EU states, it lacks three key safeguards. 1, no written constitution.
Right.
2, no constitutional court with the supremacy to strike down executive overreach. And 3, no codified limits on executive prerogative.
So the whole system, the entire thing, relies on elite self-restraint, a kind of gentleman's agreement not to abuse power.
Exactly. And that is precisely the norm that this new paradigm exported from the U.S. systematically destroys. It makes the U.K. incredibly fragile.
And then there's Brexit. The sources argue it removed this external constitutional discipline that EU law had provided.
It did. And now, as we approach the 10th anniversary in June 2026, the economic cost is just undeniable.
The numbers are stark. By 2025, Brexit had reduced UK GDP by, 6 to 8%?
And investment by 12 to 18%. The UK was the only G7 nation that hadn't recovered to its pre-pandemic GDP level by 2023. It's permanent structural damage.
And that famous claim of $350 million a week for the NHS.
It never materialized. In fact, public finances fell by $26 billion a year. That's about $500 million a week lost.
An unsustainable fiscal hole. And this economic failure created the perfect political vacuum.
Which brings us to the rise of Reform UK. The polling from late 2025 is just breathtaking.
Breathtaking is the right word. By December 2025, Reform UK had surpassed Labour in membership.
Almost 270,000 members, while later plunged below 250,000, and the polling strength reflected that.
They were polling at 27%. That's a stunning 8 points ahead of Labour and the Conservatives.
And an MRP poll in October 2025 even projected they'd get an outright majority, 367 seats.
With rhetoric that is explicitly Trump-aligned, make Britain great again.
And the policies leaving the ECHR, unlimited detention powers. And you see that demographic chasm. 36% support among over 65s, but only 7% among 18 to 24s.
A generational revolt. And this creates a really dangerous Anglo-American feedback loop.
It does. UK elites imitate illiberal U.S. tactics, and U.S. strategists point to the U.K. and say, see, even liberal Europe has moved on.
And a stark illustration of that was the February 2025 Oval Office meeting.
With Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Yes, where President Trump just berated and humiliated him on camera. That moment, it must have sent shockwaves through NATO.
It signaled that the U.S. security guarantee was now purely transactional. It could just evaporate based on the mood of the executive.
And the U.S. national security strategy in December 2025 reinforced that message.
Bluntly, it warned Europe faced civilizational erasure and questioned if Europe could even be a reliable partner anymore.
Which brings us to the EU's existential crisis. I mean, it was designed for a world where the U.S. guaranteed security and trade was rules-based. That world is gone.
Emphatically gone. So the EU faces three questions. Can it defend itself? Can it stay economically open? And can it preserve democracy internally?
The most immediate pressure point has to be defense spending.
Absolutely. At the June 2025 NATO summit, under intense pressure from Trump, The Allies committed to spending a staggering 5% of GDP on defense by 2035.
Wait, 5%? That's more than double the 2% guideline. How is that even possible?
Well, it's almost impossible under the current financial rules. You've got debt levels in France at 112% of GDP, Italy at 135%. This breaks the Maastricht Treaty rules they already struggle with.
So it's a fiscal trap. Germany's defense minister called it unrealistic, saying it would take up 40% of their national budget.
The money simply isn't there, which is why Ursula von der Leyen rushed out the Rearm Europe proposal.
Right, the $840 billion plan that required an emergency agreement to just relax all the debt rules.
An act of financial desperation driven by geopolitical necessity.
But at the same time, Varoufakis points out the contradiction. European leaders committed rhetorically to a Ukrainian victory.
But we're materially unwilling to bankroll it. He calls that Russia's victory in Ukraine, not against the Ukrainians, but against Europe's leaders.
So the sources suggest the EU won't collapse, but it'll evolve into a post-liberal regulatory empire.
With stronger industrial policy and a greater tolerance for internal democratic heterogeneity, basically allowing member states to be less liberal. Varoufakis' assessment was blunt. The single market is kaput. It's finished.
So the world is dividing into these functional spheres. Competitive neo-imperialism.
You have the U.S. sphere, which is transactional,
Yeah.
security for compliance, the China sphere, defined by infrastructure and tech, and the Russia sphere, defined by coercive instability.
And the decisive rupture is that the U.S. sphere no longer enforces democratic alignment at all.
It's just about compliance with U.S. commercial and security interests. And the sources say 2025 was the year this all cemented, marked by 3 decisive victories.
Okay, we mentioned Russia's victory over European leadership on Ukraine. What was the second?
China's victory in the trade war. They successfully weaponized rare earths, and then they defeated the chip embargo.
And the third?
Was Trump's victory against the Europeans in the tariff war, exemplified by the humiliation of von der Leyen.
All of this global instability highlights a domestic lesson that, well, the British left seems to have missed.
Specifically, Keir Starmer's government. They failed to effectively address the cost of living crisis, which just fueled a populist surge of Reform UK.
And the sources point to the success of Zoran Mamdani's election as NYC mayor as the counterexample.
Exactly. He focused on tangible, immediate issues, rent controls, bus fares, the simple populist approach the mainstream left has kind of forgotten how to do. They're debating theory when people need relief.
Ted's advice for any politician in this environment is, keep it simple, stupid.
And pivot the conversation back to growth and opportunity and entrepreneurship. The failure to do that is why labor is hemorrhaging support to reform.
So, looking ahead, the central axis of this new order is the U.S.-China relationship, not U.S.-Europe.
That's right. And Varoufakis identifies the pivotal moment for 2026 as the April meeting between President Xi and President Trump. That's where the future of tech, trade, and financial hegemony will be intensely contested.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener navigating this new world? The central finding is, it's pretty stark.
It is. Democracy is no longer self-sustaining in advanced economies. It requires active defense. The UK is currently a democratic vulnerability node, and the world has abandoned liberal gravity.
And as Gillian Tett warns companies, executives, you now have to worry about entirely new stakeholders.
National security interests and right-wing cultural values and populism. Ignoring those factors is just not an option anymore for anyone operating in this space.
It really leads to that fundamental choice Varoufakis poses for all of us.
Should we keep debating percentages and statistics, or recognize that if you try to take the politics out of the economics, you end up with very bad economics and toxic politics?
So the challenge moving forward is institutional hardening and strategic autonomy.
A necessity in a world that has reverted to older, much rougher laws of power.